Good morning. This is lesson 10 of module 5. We are on page 43 and looks like it's going to be all about clocks, which won't be hard for you guys because at the beginning of the year we did a lot of clock work. I sent home clocks, and so I want you to get them out of your packets and get ready to use those little yellow and blue handled clocks. I remember to send one home for all of you, but I didn't remember to get one for me. So I want to point out some important things on the clock. All of your clocks have a long hand, and that shows the minutes. All of your clocks have a short hand, and the short hand points to the hour. Then there's all the numbers, and they start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Each clock has marks on it for the minutes, so you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and those are the minutes. Today's lesson is only going to be about hours. So we said the little hand or the short hand points to the hour, and when the long hand points to the 12, it means it is o'clock. We say o'clock when the long hand is pointing to the 12. The top kind of clocks are all analog clocks, and the bottom parts are all digital. We're going to match the clocks so that the times match. So the first one, A, has an O clock because the long hand is pointing to the 12, and what is the short hand pointing to? A 5. So we say it's 5 o'clock. The next one has both hands pointing to the 12. So since the long hand is pointing to the 12, it's going to be o'clock. And with the short hand pointing to the 12, it's going to be 12 o'clock. Good. This should all be reviewed for everybody. The long hand is pointing to the 12, so we know it means o'clock. And the short hand is pointing to the 8, so that means it's 8 o'clock. And the last one says the long hand is pointing to the 12, so we know it's o'clock. And what is the short hand pointing to? The 1. So we find 1 o'clock and we draw a line, just like that. When we're talking about digital and it's 1 o'clock, it's the number first, the hour, and then 00. That means o'clock. 00 is o'clock. This one says, put the hour hand on this clock so that it says 3 o'clock. So the long hand points to the minutes, and they already did that. And now we need the short hand to point to the number 3. Good. And there it is, 3 o'clock. Turn the page. Excuse me, sorry about that. Write this time shown on each clock. So this one says, if it has these 2 little dots, we're going to write it in the digital format, which is with like this kind that you see on your phone or your tablet or your alarm clock, if anyone still has one. So we know the long hand is pointing to the 12 and the short hand is pointing to the 12. The short hand tells us what hour it is, so it's 12. And since it's the digital, we're going to say 00, which means o'clock. Where is the short hand pointing to? So write it down, 1 o'clock. This one says it is what time? 3 o'clock. So we're going to write 3, and then they wrote o'clock for us. What time is the short hand pointing to? Write it down. You should have written down the number 9 for 9 o'clock. We already did one just like this. The short hand and the long hand are both pointing to the 12. We see the 2 little dots, so we know we're going to need to write it in digital form. And if the shorthand is pointing to the 12, we know it is 12 o'clock. Where is the shorthand pointing to? Write it down. You should have written the number 7. 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. We have two little dots, so we're going to write it in the digital format for o'clock. And the shorthand is pointing to what number? Write it down, please. 4. Good job. This is the digital format, and what does it say? 6 o'clock. So then we write 6 o'clock. Digital format with two dots, so we're going to write 0, 0. And what is our shorthand pointing to? The number 11. Good. Write it down. 11 o'clock. The next one, we're looking for what time the shorthand is pointing to. Good. 10 o'clock. Our longhand is pointing to the 12, and our shorthand is pointing to the 6. So we're going to write it in digital format, which means 6, 0, 0, and you say 6 o'clock. The shorthand is pointing to the 2, the longhand is pointing to the 12. That can only mean one thing. What time is on our clock? Write it on the line. Good, you should have written 2 and read it 2 o'clock. Oh, look at this time. Now we have to write o'clocks. So the first one says 11, and it's in the digital format, so we're going to write 11, and then we're going to write O with a little apostrophe, clock, because that's how it's spelled. If you need to pause, go ahead and pause while you write that. We're going to do the same thing here. What time is the shorthand pointing to? Good. 8, and then we write the word O apostrophe clock. The longhand is pointing to the 12, so we know it's going to be o'clock. And the shorthand is pointing to a 3, so we're going to write 3, O with an apostrophe, clock. Good job. Let's see what your homework looks like. Oh, we're going to match the clocks. We could do this together. We have time. This was a short video. So on page 45, and we're going to read the directions, match each clock to the time it shows. Oh, we have to match from the analog and the digital. Okay, the first one says the shorthand is pointing at the 2, so let's find 2 o'clock. There it is, way at the bottom. Draw a line all the way down. Okay. The next one has the shorthand pointing to the 7, so it's 7 o'clock, straight across. The next one shows the shorthand pointing at 11 and the longhand pointing at 12, so it's 11 o'clock. Draw a line. Letter D's clock says the shorthand's pointing at the 12, so we know it's o'clock. And I'm sorry, the longhand's pointing at the 12, so we know it's o'clock. And the shorthand is pointing at the number 4, so we know it is 4 o'clock. Draw a line to 4 o'clock. Good. E says the shorthand is pointing at the 10, the longhand is pointing at the 12. We know that means o'clock, and we say 10 o'clock. Next, we have the shorthand at the 3. The longhand is still at the 12, so we know it is 3 o'clock. Draw a line. You're going to do the same thing on this side and match them up. Let's find 11 o'clock. And you find 11 o'clock and you draw a line. Match 10 o'clock to 10 o'clock. 2 o'clock to 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock to 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock all the way up to the top, 4 o'clock. And 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock. Pretty cinchy stuff. You guys know how to do this. It's all review. The last one says, put the hour hand on the clock so the clock matches the time. then write the time on the line. So we're going to add the shorthands to all the clocks. It tells us what time it needs to be. They did the first one for us. And we're going to write all our digital times on these lines. So that means we're going to have those 2 dots and the zeros. They did 6 o'clock for us, but they didn't write the shorthand on the line. So there's my 6 o'clock. The next one says 9 o'clock. Where do I point my shorthand? Draw it in. I'm going to draw it to the 9, and then I'm going to write the number 9 dot dot 0 0, and you read it 9 o'clock. 12 o'clock. I keep my shorthand pointing to the 12 too, so I just kind of write it right over the top. When I write it in digital, it's going to say 12 dot dot 0 0, and you read it 12 o'clock. The next one has a 7 o'clock. I'm going to draw my shorthand to one number. Go ahead and do that. You should have drawn it to the 7. And when you write it, you write 7 dot dot o'clock. And the last one says 1 o'clock. Take your pencil and draw the hour hand, the shorthand, to the point to the number 1. Good. And when you write it, you say 1 dot dot o'clock. That wasn't too bad. Should have all been reviewed. I'll do another. I'm going to do 2 math lessons today.